Rakesh Malhotra never imagined that a single decision would erase him so completely. At 47, he stepped onto Canadian soil, carrying secrets heavier than his luggage, unaware that this journey would be his last. What began as a private visit driven by desire and trust would end with only half of his body surfacing in a cold river, while the rest of his story vanished without a trace. Behind his respectable identity lay a hidden world that slowly tightened around him, turning love into leverage and silence into a death sentence. Rakesh Malhotra was 47 years old when his carefully constructed life began to quietly unravel. To everyone around him, he appeared ordinary and dependable. He lived in India, ran a modest export business, and maintained the image of a disciplined family man who valued routine and respectability. Neighbors described him as reserved, while colleagues saw him as cautious and predictable. Nothing about his public behavior suggested risk, recklessness, or secrets. Yet beneath this calm exterior existed a life built on deception, carefully hidden behind work schedules and international travel plans. For nearly 4 years, Rakesh had been making regular trips to Canada, claiming they were necessary to secure overseas clients and expand his company's reach. His explanations were always reasonable, supported by partial paperwork and vague business updates. No one questioned him because the trips appeared successful and profitable. What his family never knew was that these journeys had little to do with business growth. In Canada, Rakesh maintained a private relationship with a woman he had met online years earlier, a connection that slowly evolved into an intense and risky affair. This secret relationship gave Rakesh a sense of escape from the pressures of his structured life. In Canada, he acted differently, spending money freely and abandoning the caution that defined him back home. Over time, emotional dependence replaced excitement, and the boundaries he once carefully controlled began to blur. Financial decisions were made impulsively, and promises were extended beyond what he could safely keep. The double life demanded constant lies, draining both his resources and his judgment. By the time of his final journey, Rakesh was no longer in control of the world he had created. What began as a hidden romance had grown into a dangerous burden, one that quietly followed him across borders, inching closer to consequences he could no longer avoid. In early March, Rakesh prepared for another journey to Canada, presenting it to his family as a routine business trip that would last no more than 2 weeks. His behavior before departure was noticeably different from previous travels. He packed lighter than usual, carrying only one suitcase, and avoided making clear plans about meetings or return dates. He withdrew a large sum of cash from his bank account, explaining it as an emergency expense related to overseas clients, though no such clients were ever identified. Flight records later showed that Rakesh arrived in Vancouver late at night. Airport cameras captured him leaving alone, without arranging any official transport or checking into a business hotel. Instead, his phone location briefly placed him near a residential area close to the river. Within hours of his arrival, his communication with contacts in India became irregular. Messages were read but not answered, and calls were allowed to ring without response, an unusual pattern for someone who was normally meticulous about staying connected. During the following days, Rakesh made no effort to contact business associates or visit commercial districts. His passport was scanned at no corporate offices, and there were no records of formal meetings. Instead, his bank statements showed short, repeated withdrawals, suggesting private expenses rather than professional ones. The money vanished quickly, and by the 5th day, his primary account balance dropped close to zero. 1 week after his arrival, something changed abruptly. His phone stopped transmitting location data, and all activity on his cards ceased. No flight booking for a return journey was ever made. The hotel reservation that his family believed he had was later proven to be false. Authorities would later describe this period as the moment when Rakesh effectively disappeared, leaving behind only fragments of movement and financial traces, as if his life in Canada had ended without warning. The silence that followed Rakesh's disappearance was slow at first, almost easy to ignore. For the first 2 days after his expected check-in, his family assumed he was busy or dealing with time differences. Rakesh had always been disciplined about communication, but business trips sometimes caused delays, and no one wanted to believe anything was wrong. His wife continued to send messages, each one growing more concerned as hours turned into days without a reply. By the fourth day, the absence became impossible to dismiss. Rakesh's phone remained switched off, and his email inbox showed no activity. His business partner attempted to reach him through overseas contacts, but none had seen or heard from him. There were no records of meetings, no invoices issued, and no shipment scheduled during his supposed work visit. The company's operations in India slowed as decisions requiring his approval remained unresolved. Concern deepened when his return date quietly passed. His family checked airline bookings and discovered that no return ticket had ever been purchased. This revelation introduced a sense of fear that replaced earlier reassurance. Friends suggested waiting longer, but the pattern of complete silence felt deliberate, unnatural. Rakesh had never vanished without explanation before. After nearly a week, his wife contacted Indian authorities, who advised reaching out to Canadian police. A missing person report was filed overseas, but with limited details and no confirmed last location, the case was treated cautiously. Investigators initially assumed a voluntary absence or travel complication. Still, as days passed with no sign of Rakesh, the weight of uncertainty grew heavier. What began as a delay now felt like a warning, hinting that something irreversible had already occurred far from home. The discovery came on a cold, gray morning when the river was running higher than usual after days of rainfall. Local fishermen noticed an object drifting unnaturally near the edge of the water. At first, it appeared to be debris, but as it moved closer to the bank, its shape became disturbingly clear. Police were called to the scene, and the area was quickly sealed off. What they recovered was a human body, badly damaged and incomplete, severed at the waist and showing clear signs of prolonged exposure to water. The condition of the remains made immediate identification difficult. The water had distorted facial features, and there were no personal belongings attached to the body. Investigators transported the remains to a forensic facility, where specialists began the slow process of examination. Fingerprints were partially damaged, and DNA testing was ordered to confirm identity. For several tense days, the body remained officially unnamed, even as media outlets reported on the gruesome find, sparking fear and speculation in the local community. When confirmation finally came, the name shocked both Canadian and Indian authorities. The fingerprints matched those of Rakesh Malhotra. What had once been a missing person case instantly became a homicide investigation. The reality of his death transformed concern into horror. His family, still hoping for a safe return, were instead forced to face the brutal truth that only part of him had been found. The nature of the injuries suggested more than a simple accident. The clean separation and lack of defensive wounds raised immediate suspicion of foul play. Investigators concluded that the river was not the place where Rakesh had been killed, but rather where someone had tried to hide what was left of him. The peaceful surface of the water now concealed a violent act, turning the riverbank into the silent witness of a crime that had only just begun to unfold. As the investigation intensified, detectives began reconstructing the final days of Rakesh's life by tracing his movements and personal connections in Canada. What emerged was a hidden network of secrets that sharply contradicted the respectable image he maintained in India. Hotel records revealed that he had never stayed at a business hotel, despite what he had told his family. Instead, he had booked short stays near a residential area close to the river, often canceling and rebooking rooms within hours. Further examination of surveillance footage showed Rakesh entering an apartment building late at night 2 days after his arrival. He was carrying a small bag and appeared relaxed, unaware that he would never be seen leaving that location. Investigators linked the apartment to a woman who was not listed as any known associate or business partner. Background checks revealed she had no professional ties to Rakesh, but financial records told a different story. Bank statements showed multiple transfers made from Rakesh's account to hers over several months, including one significant transaction just days before his disappearance. The amount was far larger than anything he had previously sent. Authorities believe this transfer may have been the trigger for events that followed. There were also signs of recent tension, including a sudden attempt by Rakesh to recover part of the money. As these details surfaced, investigators began to view the relationship not as a simple affair, but as a dangerous entanglement driven by emotional dependence and financial strain. The secrecy that once protected Rakesh now worked against him, limiting witnesses and clear timelines. Each new discovery peeled away another layer of his double life, revealing how private choices can create consequences far beyond what anyone expects. Forensic examination played a crucial role in uncovering what had happened to Rakesh after he vanished. Specialists determined that the condition of the body did not match prolonged exposure to water alone. The level of decomposition suggested that he had been killed several days before being placed in the river. This finding confirmed that the location of discovery was not the scene of the crime, but a disposal site chosen to delay identification and destroy evidence. Closer analysis revealed traces of sedatives in his bloodstream. The dosage was high enough to render a person unconscious, but not immediately fatal. This indicated that Rakesh had likely been incapacitated before his death, unable to resist or escape. The absence of defensive injuries supported this conclusion. Investigators believe the sedatives were administered in a controlled environment, such as a private residence, rather than in a public or chaotic setting. The manner in which the body had been separated further deepened suspicions. The cut was precise, showing signs of planning rather than panic. Forensic experts concluded that tools had been used carefully, suggesting the person responsible was calm, deliberate, and had sufficient time. This was not an act driven by sudden rage, but one executed with intention and preparation. Environmental evidence from the river indicated that the body had been placed in the water at a specific point upstream, likely during the night when fewer people were present. This required familiarity with the area and confidence in avoiding detection. Investigators now believe the crime involved more than impulse. It involved trust, access, and knowledge. The evidence painted a chilling picture of betrayal, pointing towards someone who had been close enough to control the situation from start to finish. Forensic examination played a crucial role in uncovering what had happened to Rakesh after he vanished. As the investigation progressed, momentum slowly began to fade. The woman connected to Rakesh became the central focus, yet she was nowhere to be found. Within days of the body's identification, she had vacated her apartment. The space was left unusually clean, with no personal photographs, documents, or electronic devices behind. Neighbors reported seeing her leave with multiple bags, but no one could say where she went or whether she left alone. Authorities issued alerts and attempted to trace her movements through travel records and financial activity. However, her bank accounts had been emptied weeks earlier, and her phone number was disconnected shortly after Rakesh's arrival in Canada. There were no recent border crossings under her name, raising the possibility that she had either left using false identification or was hiding within the country. Without locating her, investigators struggled to move the case forward. The lack of witnesses further complicated matters. The apartment building had limited surveillance, and the available footage only confirmed Rakesh's arrival, not what happened afterward. No neighbors reported unusual sounds or disturbances during the estimated time of the crime. The controlled nature of the act suggested deliberate efforts to avoid attention. Despite strong circumstantial evidence, prosecutors faced a major obstacle. Without a complete body, a confirmed crime scene, or a suspect in custody, the case could not proceed to court. International cooperation slowed the process, as evidence was spread across two countries. Over time, public interest faded, resources were redirected, and the investigation was quietly downgraded. Rakesh's death became one of many unresolved cases, suspended between suspicion and proof, leaving justice incomplete and questions unanswered. The death of Rakesh Malhotra left behind a trail of grief that stretched across continents. In India, his family struggled to reconcile the man they knew with the hidden life revealed after his disappearance. The absence of a complete body denied them closure, turning mourning into a prolonged state of uncertainty. Rituals were performed without finality, and memories became tangled with unanswered questions that would never fully settle. In Canada, the case slowly slipped from headlines, yet it remained open in official records. Investigators revisited the file from time to time, reviewing evidence that pointed in the same direction but never crossed the line into certainty. The river continued to flow, reshaping its banks and washing away traces that might once have spoken. With each passing season, the likelihood of new discoveries faded further into silence. Rakesh's story became a cautionary tale shared quietly among those who heard fragments of it. It was a reminder of how secrecy can isolate a person, even while surrounded by loved ones. The double life that once gave him escape ultimately stripped him of protection, leaving him vulnerable in unfamiliar territory. Trust placed in the wrong hands proved irreversible. Years later, his name remained listed among unresolved deaths, a case number without resolution. The truth of his final moments stayed locked away, known only to the person responsible. What endured was not justice, but a warning. Hidden choices, unspoken risks, and divided loyalties can lead to endings far darker than anyone imagines, leaving only silence where answers should have been.